Hello, everyone. This is Pat Foley with recruitingforum.com. We're here for another one of our interview series regarding the college recruiting environment during COVID-19. Youth sports and sports in general have really just come to a full stop, which has never happened before as a result of the crisis. And so we're reaching out across the country to knowledgeable members of the sports community in a variety of different sports to try to pick their brains a little bit about what's happening and what might happen in the future. And I'm very happy to be joined today by Zac Hojnacki with the Boys and Girls Club of Northern Westchester. Their team is called the Marlins. I want to give a little bit of background because Zac's got a really cool background in swimming. He swam for the fantastic University of Arizona program. Was qualified for the Olympic trials and also the World trials. And then educationally, he's got a great background as well. He's got a PhD in educational psychology. So Dr. Hojnacki is who we're addressing today. And so Zac, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Marlins program that you're heading up now?
Yeah, Patrick, and thanks for having me. The Marlins program, so we're based out of Mount Kisco, New York, which is about an hour north of New York City. And we're a club team that's institutionally owned by the Boys and Girls Club in Mount Kisco. We have about 275 athletes now. We've grown incrementally over the course of the past 2 years. I've been there. It'll be 2 years in August. So we've seen a little bit of growth up from about 220 athletes, ages from as young as 5 up to 17. We have athletes who return from college to swim with us. And then the Boys and Girls Club itself has a separate but related Learn to Swim program that also operates out of our facility. So I think we're a unique organization in that we're associated with the Boys and Girls Club. So there's a lot of diversity within our building. And we are really aspiring to provide a all-encompassing youth sports experience for our athletes. So not only provide for them the avenues to be successful in the sport in whatever capacity that means to them, but also to really take up advantage of the opportunity that we have to develop life skills for these kids. And it's a very affluent area with a lot of really smart athletes. And so we really try to make sure that we accommodate that as best we can to help them to use swimming as a platform to higher education.
That's awesome. The Boys and Girls Club is an organization I'm really familiar with and have had worked with here in our area in Philadelphia, and it's an incredible organization. Their mission is really impressive.
Outstanding. It really is.
Yep. So obviously, I imagine you guys are shut down when normally you'd be would you be gearing up for your season right now? What does your season look like?
Right. So yeah, because we're of our location, we're one of the last areas to reopen nationally, and so we've been shut down effectively since early March.
Okay.
At this point, we were gearing up for our championship meets for our age group swimmers and meets like NCSA championships, which is not a USA Swimming meet, but it's very similar in terms of a junior nationals format. And we had, unfortunately, all those meets were canceled just as they were about to begin. During this time, we would have been finishing up our short course season in April, and then would have taken a short break and started to begin the process around this time of transitioning into our long course season, which this year would have included the Olympic trials, but unfortunately that's been delayed as well. So, we're in a bit of a state of limbo at this point. Our LSC, which is our governing body for swimming, has suspended all sanctions until the end of June, and USA Swimming has done the same. Okay. So there's no meets. Very few teams in our area are able to resume training at this point, and we're kind of waiting on the state of New York to lift the restrictions in our region so that we can begin the process of safely reopening.
Yeah, it's certainly regionally dependent. I've heard from down south there was a program that was expecting possibly to get activated as early as this weekend, but up here in the Northeast, the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York area, everything is still very much in limbo.
Yeah.
What is the recruiting in a normal year? What does the recruiting look like? Like, where are college coaches getting to see? Which meets are they going to? And how do you think it's going to be? What's the impact going to be of this shutdown on just the normal flow of recruiting?
Sure. So on one hand, there has been an immediate impact because meets like the NCSA championship
Mhm.
were historically opportunities for college coaches to go watch athletes compete at their quote unquote taper meet at the end of the season. And swimming specifically is impacted by this right away because, unlike a lot of other sports where you could, for example, in basketball, as a college coach, in theory, go watch a recruitable athlete at any time
Right.
and get a general idea of their ability. But in swimming, it's so specific to the timeline of the training season when athletes perform their best. And
Yep.
so not having that opportunity to taper or compete at a taper meet at the end of the spring is impactful because you really don't have all the information that you typically would have as a college coach in the recruiting process.
That's a
A lot of
really
them
good
right now.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I grew up as a swimmer, and my girls are just summer swimmers, and it's true. The training in swimming, maybe track and field might be a little bit similar, but it's different than most sports in the sense that there's a very defined curve where you're breaking yourself down and then allowing yourself to build back up, and you hit that level, and that's where you really need to be measured. You can't just dive into a
Mhm.
pool and hit your peak. So that's a great point that didn't occur to me. Yeah.
Right.
So
It's tough. Oh, please.
what's the alternative? Do you think? Like, how are they going to push some of these meets back until September, and you're just going to shift the training curve, or how are you going to? What do you think is going to happen?
So, I mean, from a competitive structure standpoint, I don't know that there really is much that can be done to replicate what was lost.
Yeah.
And I think that's a realization within the swimming community, especially as this has become more prolonged, is that the playing field isn't fair, which is something I think we have to grapple with as a society moving forward for some time. Is that there are lots of things happening right now that aren't fair,
Hmm.
but also there's no way in this sport to just pivot all of a sudden, swim for a month, and then go to a high level championship meet and be prepared to
Right.
perform.
Right.
So that opportunity that in that time frame, I think is lost, and that's just something we have to accept. We, as a program, spent a lot of time educating our athletes initially when the shutdown began on the impact of a prolonged period out of the water, both positive and negative, what it does to your body, how it will affect you psychologically, and the things that we can do in the interim to help us be prepared to take advantage of the opportunity to swim again when that time comes. And I think that's all that we can do as developmental coaches. In terms of the recruiting process, a lot of coaches are proceeding, at least from what I've noticed, as they would normally. I've been fielding some recruiting calls as coaches gear up for the early June period where they can start to talk to rising juniors.
Right.
And so they're proceeding as they would normally. We are coaching our athletes through the recruiting process as we would in the past. So we're going through a process of educating the kids on how to put together a spreadsheet of potential schools with relevant information academically and athletically, how to put together a resume and cover letter, how to reach out to coaches, what to talk about, the questions to ask. And so that process is proceeding as it would normally. And I think the coaches are moving forward based on the information that they do have.
Right.
So, what times did the swimmers go in January or February or before? What does their trajectory look like up to this point? And then, of course, as you're alluding to, if there are relationships that the coaches might have with their club coach,
Hmm.
can you rely a little bit more heavily on those things to get a feel for the kid in terms of character and how they've developed and what their trajectory is. So
Yeah, it's
I
a
think everyone's
great
doing the best
point.
they can.
Yeah, they'll word of mouth, I guess, is going to become a lot more important, and relationships, because essentially there's going to be a hole in the data. Normally the data is this curve, and all of a sudden you're going to have this big gap, and then it really, I guess, depends quite a bit. You mentioned junior year. With a lot of sports, and I've talked to people from a number of different sports, and the answers vary a little bit, but usually. In fact, I was speaking to a basketball program administrator, and he actually said freshman year is super important for them because that's when they get on the radar.
Mhm.
But I think like with swimming, a lot of it has to do with physical development, and
Yep.
and really, you're probably not going to see that much with a freshman. You really need to see them at that junior year.
Yep.
And I assume junior year is when a lot of the commitments happen.
Yeah. Well, now as the recruiting rules are constantly shifting, it started earlier and earlier. So we're seeing a lot of commitments among juniors, which, a whole nother topic. But
Well, it's that. Listen, there were kids committing in eighth grade in some of these sports, so
right,
thankfully,
right.
thankfully that has improved.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's any sport now that still happens, but it wasn't that long ago that kids were signing in eighth grade, which is
But
wild.
in swimming, you're right. One of the other things that's unique about it is that in some of the other sports, the trajectory is very linear,
Mhm.
or even exponential in terms of growth and maturation and improvement, or the impact of growth and maturation on improvement. Whereas in
Mhm.
swimming, it's a little bit more complex, especially gender can play a big role in that. For male swimmers, growth and maturation is predominantly beneficial. For
Yeah.
female swimmers, it varies.
Yeah.
So I think that it's in the best interest of college coaches. They're trying to identify athletes who have the capacity to improve when they get to college, because otherwise you can recruit some athlete who has had a baseline level of success, but when they get to their team, they're either burnt out or they're not. There's really nothing to build on
Mhm.
developmentally, and so then they can't contribute in the way that they were hoping that they would
Sure.
by the time that they're part of the team.
I guess one advantage to swimming from a training perspective is you can social distance to a certain extent. I mean, I think the
Yeah,
assumption right now, and way out of my realm here, but that in the water is a fairly safe environment from a virus standpoint. I think about what it sometimes looks like at practice where you've got five kids at the end of the lane all standing right next to each other. That's not going to work anymore. But you can space out in the pool more so than you can space out in, let's say, a basketball court. When do you think you'll be able to get the kids back in the pool, on a modified basis where you're limiting how many kids are in the lane and you're keeping them away from each other?
well, I'm hopeful based on the fact that maybe I think three of the regions in New York, or maybe four of the regions in New York, have begun phase one reopening. And
Hmm.
obviously, there's been reopening around the country. In Georgia, there in Arizona, where I'm from, teams have resumed training. And so I'm hopeful that in June or maybe early July, that there's a possibility that we would be able to resume training on a modified basis.
Yeah.
We have a um, I would call it a wireframe, but it's probably a little bit more substantive than that in terms of a safety action plan already on paper to be able to adequately address the social distancing requirements, which sort of I cross-referenced against the CDC guidelines, against USA Swimming guidelines, using information from other programs that have reopened. So I feel confident that we can safely reopen using social distancing. But it's certainly going to look different than it has in the past. I mean,
Sure.
we, for example, as a program with, like I said, almost 300 athletes, I have an 8-lane 25-yard pool, just one. And
Mm.
so we are pretty high volume in terms of the number of athletes that we're
Yeah.
serving on a daily basis. So um, for however long that we have to follow these guidelines in order for us to train safely, our program is going to look different.
Yeah.
And how that is, I'm not entirely sure yet. And so that's a question that I'm constantly asking myself and the people around me in leadership is, short term, how do we do this? Long term, what are the implications? What are the implications of a second wave and then subsequent closures if that is to happen? So, within our sport, even within club, not to mention college, there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding this reopening process and what comes after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely unprecedented. So
Mhm.
it's you're at each step along the way, you're kind of inventing what it's going to look like, and you
Right.
do have that challenge of having so many kids that a pool has a normal capacity to serve this many kids at this amount of time.
Mhm.
That's going to be completely different. The time window is either going to have to expand, or the time that they have in the pool is going to have to shrink, probably a little
Yeah.
bit of both.
Yep.
Um, One thing I'd like to ask, given your educational background, is I always think that the greatest value of youth sports is the psychological benefit, or the learning benefit of sports. There are studies that bear this out very convincingly, that kids who participate in sports have better outcomes educationally, career wise. I mean, it shapes the direction of your life. What are you seeing, or maybe what efforts are you taking with your kids to sort of just keep them mentally engaged during this shutdown?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a component of this that I think I'm the most proud of, and I think is the bright spot that has emerged from all of this. Um, Even before this happened, our program specifically, in part because of my background, puts a very large emphasis on athlete education and sports science. And
Hmm.
so I felt we were well positioned for this pivot, for however long it occurs. We've been doing Zoom programming ever basically since the second week or third week of the shutdown. And we do Monday through Friday, essentially 3 to 4 hours of programming daily for our athletes.
Wow.
We have a few days a week of dry land, so sort of like strength and conditioning work, which is live on Zoom, and it varies. The emphasis varies depending on the age group and the frequency and duration. We're doing things like strength, mobility, flexibility, and some conditioning work as well. And that was a component I was the most skeptical about, being functional
Mm-hmm.
over the internet, and it's been the thing that I've been the most impressed by is the quality of we're having multiple staff members being able to see on the Zoom screen, 20, 25 athletes at a time. They're staying within the screen. They're doing a really good job of staying focused and not getting distracted. And then as coaches, we're really focused on keeping them engaged in what we're doing and giving them feedback. And so our athletes, just from a physical standpoint, I can say have improved in dry land during this time, which to me is like amazing.
Right. Sure.
And then in addition to the dry land component, we've done a lot of athlete education. I have a relationship with a sports physiologist called Dr. G, who is the head of sports science for US. It's pentathlon, and he used to be the sports physiologist for USA Swimming before Russell Mark. So he has done like 4 or 5 talks for us on heart rate training, on technique in swimming, energy systems. He's incredible. We've done race analysis videos. We do mental health checkups where we'll do small group talks, and sometimes we focus on swimming related things and talk about, like today we were going to do a talk about lane etiquette, but there are other days where I've had the staff just teach the kids something that is not related to swimming. So we've had kids, staff members teach the kids how to make a fire and build s'mores, or how to change a car battery. Or I did a talk on financial planning and like long-term management, things that life skills that you often, wish your kids would be taught in school, and sometimes they're not. It's a really good opportunity to do that stuff. And it's really helped keep our kids engaged in what they're doing and happy. Like
Yep.
they're healthier mentally because they're able to see us every week and work with us, and vice versa.
That's amazing. I mean, you really, it sounds like you're crushing this in terms of doing the very best you can with
Thank
an
you.
incredibly difficult situation, and paying attention to, they've taken away the pool, but they're still athletes, and they're still engaged. They're still teammates. So that's terrific. Zach, I'm super impressed, and I want to thank you for taking this time to share this information with us. And I will be staying in touch with you to follow how this goes. And I wish you and your whole program the best of luck for when things finally get back together and you guys get back in the pool.
Yeah, thanks again, Patrick, for having me. I'm very supportive of anything that improves the youth sport experience for kids. So I really am impressed by what you're doing, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Thanks, Jack. Thank you very much.